Well, we should never underestimate or belittle the importance of recording the attacks on Ukraine by Russia. Last night, a huge attack on Kharkiv with drones and ballistic missiles, injuring 6 people, including a child. And it's important to focus on the fact that Russia's attacks are almost exclusively on civilian targets, whereas the Ukrainian attacks are on military hardware, on attacking airfields successfully. And, it's the Russian ballistic missiles are senseless and terrifying. People breathe a sigh of relief if there's no casualties, but these things seem to be targeted at homes, and while it's important to mention that and to focus on that, it's also important to see what Putin's doing at home. And this phenomenon that's unfolding at the moment, largely obscured by the fog of war and the distractions of diplomatic theatre, Putin is turning on his own. The Siloviki, Russia's power ministries, security elites, military industrial barons, and the Siloviki, drawn from the ranks of the FSB, the military, the interior ministry, have long formed the backbone of his regime. They're the enforcers, the loyalists, the true believers, or so we thought. But recent events suggest that Putin, cornered economically and strategically, has begun devouring his own creatures. The term Silovik comes from the Russian sila, meaning force, and refers to any senior figure from the security or the armed forces or the armed structures of the state, FSB generals, military commanders, general guard officials, heads of the armed industry. They're not merely bureaucrats, they're the Praetorian elite of post-Soviet Russia, men like Igor Serkin, Sergei Shoigu, and more recently Yevgeny Prigozhin. They populate the upper echelons of both Kremlin decision-making and the industrial complex that fuels Russia's war machine. So why is Putin turning on them? Well, this is where it becomes interesting, because according to independent Russian analysts, the Russian economy, so often the subject of Western misunderstanding, is now in slow decline. It's moved from slow decline into what seems to be free fall. And the most shocking figure, a 19% collapse in corporate income tax revenues in the first 2 months of 2025, despite a tax rise. That's not a blip, that's a hemorrhage. And production figures confirm the rot. Cement, ball bearings, truck tires, washing machines and vodka all down by up to 40%. Even steel production, supposedly shielded by wartime demand, is falling. And yet, this is the moment when Putin has chosen to accelerate a sweeping purge. Russia is now locked in what one might call a war economy without a war dividend. All the borrowed money, all the fiscal reserves have gone into armaments, not productivity. Tanks, shells, missiles. They don't stimulate growth. They don't pay salaries. They don't rebuild schools. They produce death and then rust. And what we're witnessing is a classic authoritarian crisis. The money's run out. The war drags on. Popular patience is fraying. So the dictator does what dictators do. He tightens the noose, not around his enemies, but around his allies. It's rather like, I can't remember whether it's sin or death in that guard the two, that guard the portal to hell in Paradise Lost. And one of them is a shadowy figure, like something out of Lord of the Rings, a wraith. But the other one is this amazing figure with dogs going in and out of her womb, devouring her from inside. And that seems to me to be a very good image of modern Russia. Before their gates there sat on either side a formidable shape. The one seemed woman to the waist and fair, but ended foul in many a scaly fold, voluminous and vast. A serpent armed with mortal sting. About her middle round a cry of hell hounds never ceasing barked. Out of thy head I sprung. Amazement seized all the host of heaven back. They recoiled afraid. At first they called me sin. And for a sign portentous, held me but familiar grown, I pleased, and with attractive graces won the most averse, thee chiefly, who full oft thyself in me, thy perfect image viewing, becamest enamoured, and such joy thou tookst. Anyway, so then it goes into some sort of incestuous devolution. And in the last few weeks, arrests have swept through the Russian interior. High-ranking officials in the National Guard, heads of state construction companies, even figures in the pharmaceutical and regulatory sectors have been arrested on corruption charges. And the figures are modest, a few $1,000s worth of materials or bribes, but the message is seismic. This isn't about corruption. Corruption has been the glue of Putin's regime for 20 years. This is about control. These arrests are not legal proceedings, they're acts of fear, and the security state is turning inward. And if this sounds familiar, it should do, because in 1936, Stalin began the Great Purge with similar logic. We've got new figures of Stalin pushing up in the metro and elsewhere. Economic mismanagement, external isolation, and an entrenched elite are no longer to be trusted. Stalin purged the Red Army Command, the NKVD, and even his oldest Bolshevik comrades. Putin isn't a Stalin, but the pattern is unmistakable. And like Stalin, Putin is now obsessed not with loyalty, but with initiative. An independent power is dangerous. Autonomous wealth is dangerous. Charisma is dangerous. That's why Prigozhin died. That's why Kadyrov was summoned and tamed. That's why men once thought untouchable are now behind bars. Putin doesn't want a rival, or rather, the image of Putin doesn't want a rival. And the Siloviki have always enjoyed an unwritten contract to obey and enrich yourself. They did, but now that money is gone, and they are a threat. The war is endless, and Putin no longer sees use in their independence. He wants uniformity, not competence. Hence the shift from totalitarian toleration to totalitarian surveillance, from nepotism to nightly knocks on the door. The vertical of power, Putin's term, is rotting from within. It's no longer a pyramid of stability. It's a corridor of locked doors and listening devices. What happens when a regime begins to devour its own? When paranoia becomes policy? History tells us collapse, but not before much more cruelty. As a coherent hierarchy, it's eating itself, quietly, bloodlessly at the moment, for now. But let's not mistake silence for calm. The purge has begun, and history teaches us that purges end not with renewal, but with ruin.